Hello, I'm Beth. Thank you for joining me in my basement yoga room for today's gentle yoga practice. I'm calling this practice playing with pigeon. So that's pigeon pose or half pigeon pose, one that commonly appears in many yoga class. It's a pose that many students love. It's a pose that many students hate. And I found that students who dislike the pose, it tends to be because they can't find a comfortable version of the pose for their bodies. So what I hope to do in this kind of workshop style class is to play around with some different variations of pigeon so that you can find a version that's comfortable for your body. If you don't feel warmed up or you need a little bit more of a warm up for your lower body before starting this practice, I'd recommend the last practice that I filmed. I'll link to it right up here. It's a all floor lower body focus practice, so it'll provide a nice gentle warm up for this class if you feel like you need a little bit more than what we're going to do today. We will be using some props for this class. They're optional, but they allow you to play around with pigeon pose from a couple of different ways, a couple of alternatives that you might want to try. So one of the props is the chair that I have here behind me. And then the other prop, I have my yoga bolster. If you don't have a yoga bolster, a sturdy cushion from your couch, a sturdy stack of blankets or folded towels could also work really well. A round cushion, a cushion from your bed. There are a lot of options, just something that's fairly firm. You can see this isn't soft like a bed pillow. It's fairly firm. And again, these are complete options. They're not necessary. All right, so we're going to begin this practice lying down. Come to lying on your mat or soft surface or towel, whatever you have. And if you do have your blankets, your bolster, you might want to have them near your feet as an option. So come down with your feet flat on the floor, knees bent up toward the sky, the ceiling. And we'll start by widening the feet a little bit and then moving the knees together and apart. So this is a little bit of a hip warm-up if you haven't done any other warm-up before this practice. Let's see if you can notice how your body feels today. Feeling the movement in your hip joint. And then from here you can flow into more of a windshield wiper move. So rolling the knees to one side and then the other. And you see my one hip lifts off the floor when I do that. That's fine if that feels right for your body. You have the option of choosing whether you want to allow yourself to roll that much or not. And as you go the one direction, your top leg is in internal rotation, your bottom is an external. It's external rotation that we use for pigeon pose, but it's also really good to stretch your hips in both directions. So we'll come back through center, both feet flat on the floor, and we'll play around with our first version of pigeon pose, also called figure four pose, or in this position, reclined pigeon or reclined figure four. Take your right foot and then cross your ankle just under the knee or just over the knee, depending how you look at it. Allow the top knee to bend away from your face. The foot is gently flexed, so it stays active in your posture. So you can see how your legs form a four shape. This is the basic pose. This is the basic shape that we'll be playing around with in different positions, different body positions. You can move this knee closer to your face, further away, and continue to get some energy, some movement, some mobility in that joint. The other option, and this works really well if you have your prop close to you, is to place your bottom foot on the prop and then stretch that way. This just brings a little bit more of the stretch into the bottom leg. You can also lift and hold that way if that's comfortable for your body, but it's not necessary. What we're looking for in a functional yoga practice is, can you feel a stretch in your target area or the target area of the pose? In this case, again, it's this outer area of the hip. We'll start to switch to the other side. So I'll cross my left ankle over my right knee. My left knee comes out toward you. So right here, I don't feel a lot of stretch for me. So I might move this around a little bit and see where I feel more. Maybe I move the bottom foot out a little bit more to the side or in the other direction. We're not going to do this today, but I know in this position, in this lying version, I definitely get more stretch if I bring it into a twist. So when you're doing a functional practice, it doesn't really matter what your pose looks like. It's how you feel it in your body, and that's what's important. A feeling of comfort balanced with a feeling of activity, with a feeling of stretch that you're going for. And if you did on the first side, or if it just feels good on this side, you might move the knee in and out. You might place the bottom foot on your prop. So for some of you, this might feel really gentle. For others, it might feel more intense. There's going to be so many factors that can contribute to that, including the variations in our own bodies, but also our own variations from day to day, how we feel one day to the next. Take your foot down, maybe a few more windshield wipers here on the floor. All right, and next you'll allow both knees to come to one side. Place your top hand on the floor to help push yourself up. We'll next be practicing some versions of pigeon from a seated position. Two different seated positions, first with the chair, and then we'll come back down to the floor. So if you're using your chair, come into your chair. If not, you can practice these on a floor. You can actually do these versions sitting on a couch if you don't have a chair conveniently in your workout room like I do. Before we go into that figure 4 shape, we're going to bring a little bit of strengthening into our hip flexors. We often stretch the hip flexor area. I know it feels really good for me to stretch that area. Sometimes we forget to bring a little strength into that area. So to do this, you'll float one foot off the floor. You can start either side. If you're mirroring me, it'll be your left side. Place your hand gently on top of your thigh and push your hand with a little bit of force, maybe 50% force, at the same time as you lift the top of your leg into your hand. So an equal and opposing force. And hopefully you feel that activating the front part of right at the top of your femur where your leg meets your pelvic girdle. That's your hip flexor area. You can hold for a few seconds, you can release, and then hold again. So it's an equal and opposite reaction, or an isometric strengthening move. And then release, and we'll try that on the other side. Float that foot off the ground. You can hold on to the side of your chair if that helps you feel more stable. Hand on top of the thigh, and press in opposing forces. Knee or top of the thigh into the hand. Release and try one more time. And then release. Then as we move into figure 4, we'll stretch one leg out straight. And by straight, stretching it out long. It doesn't have to be straight. Heel on the ground so you can stretch your right leg. And then take your left leg, place the ankle over the shin to start with, letting the knee open out. So you can get the sense of how this shape, maybe a little bit more of a wide figure 4, feels in your body before we demand a little bit more of the body. If this is feeling okay and stable, then slide the ankle so that it's just above the knee, and then begin to slide the bottom leg in any amount. So it might stay out fairly far away from your body. You can help it with your hands. It might come so that your ankle is under the knee on the bottom knee, and you have more of a right angle shape here. And if you do this knee may be way up here. I was much closer to there when I started. I've been doing yoga for almost 20 years. So please don't compare the shape and the feeling in your body to what my body looks like. That doesn't make any sense, right? If you're here and you feel a nice, decent stretch in this target area, you are doing the pose absolutely perfectly for you. Just remember that. That's what we're looking for. What is the perfect pose for you? And just like we did on the floor, you can hold here. You can continue to take some motion into your joint. Looking or exploring for what feels interesting, what feels good. And when you're ready, release the side so that leg that was on top is going to stretch out long. Remember that it certainly doesn't have to be straight. Your right ankle this time crossing over your calf. Give it a chance to open up. So this is that external rotation. External rotation is when the joint turns out away from the body, opening an angle more. If this feels okay, ankle can come to above the knee, and then you can start to slide the bottom foot in any amount. Maybe you kind of hop it in step by step until you get to a part where it feels like an okay stretch here. Now, for those of you who maybe are upright like this, your knee is relatively hanging down due to gravity, but you're not feeling a lot of a stretch, the other option is to lean forward right at that same hip joint and see if that changes where you feel the stretch in your body. Does that give you more of a sensation of stretch? And like I showed you on the floor as an option, you might even kind of add a little bit of a lean, a little bit of a twist action to it. So much of this has to do with where our bones fit into the different joints in our body, how our bones are shaped. So it's not whether or not you're flexible enough. Flexibility is a little part of it. That's why my knee goes down a little further, because I've gotten more flexible over time. But it doesn't have a lot to do with where I feel the stretch or where I need to position my body in order to feel the stretch. All right, and then you can release that side. I haven't been doing a lot of breath in this practice. You always want to breathe, and breathe with a comfortable breath. Make sure that as you're staying in your pose, you're not holding the breath, you're continuing to inhale and exhale through the nose if that feels okay, but it's fine to inhale through the mouth, the nose, exhale through the mouth as well. Come back down to the floor for our next version of seated pigeon. And remember, we've already done two. We did the practice lying and the practice seated in the chair. If either of those, yeah, this feels great, I want to play around more with that, continue to play around more with that. You don't have to go on to the next version. This is not a competition to get to the end. These are just different variations to try for your body. So in this version, again, I like to stretch the one leg out. So stretch one leg out and start in the same way as we started seated on the chair. You'll probably need to put your hands behind you and lean back a little bit on your hands this time. And allow the ankle to come on top of the shin, the leg to open out. And this just gives yourself a feel for, is this position going to work for you at all? If it feels like it is, then you can slide your ankle up to above your knee. And if that's still working for you, then you can begin to drag your bottom heel in. Now in the seated version, there's really a lot of things to adjust. So you can adjust where your bottom foot, your heel comes in. It can be further toward your body or closer toward your body. If it helps to do it with moving your bottom, you can slide your bottom more toward your foot. You can rock your hands back. That'll bring you more kind of like toward the reclined version. But if you want to do it sort of halfway between seated and reclined, and that feels really good for you, you can do it that way. And then you can adjust with this side. Again, moving the knee away from your face will usually have a more intense stretch. You can even see how it feels to slide the leg a little further, a little less far. So these are all the things that you can adjust to make the pose your own. And you can hold. You can hold and breathe. If you're feeling a good amount of sensation, and we define good as, it can be intense, but not sharp or stingy. That's where we start to move into the area of pain. So if you feel anything like that, you always want to come out, give your body a break, do a different version of the pose. When you're ready, take your leg out. Maybe shake your legs out for a second. You can do a long windshield wiper, or you can do some seated windshield wipers as well. These always feel really nice to me as a little mini break in between poses. And then we'll switch to the other side. Leg comes out straight first, ankle comes over calf, taking a moment to feel this shape. One of the things I like about yoga is it really encourages us to tune in to what our body is saying, to explore, to pay attention, and to be interested in, what does this feel like for me? And then if this does feel fine, you can move the ankle to above the knee. Start to slowly, don't have to go fast, slide the bottom heel in any amount. And remember that you can also adjust by sliding your bottom toward your foot. Sometimes it feels easier to adjust that way if you have strength in your arms to do that. You can come down to forearms if you'd rather have kind of a half reclined version of this pose. And if it feels good to be seated, you can be seated here, perhaps holding this for a few more breaths. Paying attention to whether the stretch, the intensity of your stretch sensation ever becomes more than that, ever becomes something like a pain, a more localized area that feels sharp, feels more stinging. That is not what we're going for in yoga. We want to feel something, and that sensation might sometimes be a little unpleasant if it's a really tight stretch, but never to the point, again, of that really pointed, sharp pain. And then release, and once again, a few windshield wipers, shaking this out a bit. And if you'd like, you can do those long-legged wipers too. All right, so now is when we are going to use the bolster or the stack of blankets for a way to come into half pigeon. So this is usually a kneeling posture. This is a way to come into it that can be a little bit easier on the body, and it can feel like a really nice place to stay as well. I'm going to move my bolster a little bit closer to me. I'm going to come onto hands and knees, but I'll have my hands right on top of the bolster or your stack of blankets. We're going to come into a lunge position with the lunging leg. I'm going to take my right leg in front of the bolster. I'm just going to come into a lunge. You can come into that however feels right to you. Hands on the bolster. So this might feel like a nice place to stay for a few minutes. Can be, again, another good stretch on the hip flexor. Like I said, we're often trying to stretch this area of the hip flexor. That's why we did that little bit of strengthening thing. You can have your bolster on your side to support your thigh like this. This is the magic of yoga props. There's so many wonderful things that you can do with them. So a lunge can feel like a nice stretch, a good place to start. Your chair is next to you, so if you feel wobbly, you have your chair at any time. You need to put a hand on your chair to help balance. My bolster is high enough that I can put my hands on my bolster to do that as well. And notice that the front points of my hips, the ASIS, they are pointing relatively toward the front. And my back foot, hopefully, is straight out from, it's kind of a straight line from the middle of the side of my bottom all the way out to my heel. If you look back and you don't see that, you can adjust a little bit. So as we move into our pigeon pose, the two things that are going to be important are the position of the knee and the position of the front shin. So the knee has to externally rotate to get that wider angle. And you want it to be not straight out from the hip, but actually wider so that the knee comes more to the outside edge of your mat. In this position, my shin might be fairly parallel to the front of the mat, but the heel can also come closer to the body. And you'll see as we move into that. I'm going to scooch back just a little bit. And you can slowly sort of walk your foot over to the side, but only enough so that the knee comes out to the side. So my knee isn't going straight forward. It's coming out to the side at an angle. If your shin doesn't feel comfortable going straight across, mine is fairly straight to and parallel with my mat, You can move your foot closer. It might go under your prop a little bit. That's totally fine. And that might be easier with blankets. So now we're in half pigeon pose, a supported version. This version feels so good in my body. I feel like I can just hang here forever. You might not feel that way. If this is feeling horrible for you, go back to the chair version, the seated version, the floor version. Remember, my goal is to help you find a version that makes you feel comfortable, not like, oh, I could do that like Beth did. Totally unnecessary. For me, though, this does feel really nice. It feels like something I can sustain, and I can also play with moving forward and taking this into a resting version on my hands. If I have my chair in front of me, I can rest my arms right on the chair that way. So that's another option. In fact, let me see if I can drag the chair over and show you it that way. This feels really nice too. I could just hang here all day, but we probably should switch to the other side. So I'm going to use my chair, use my bolster to help push myself up. I'm pushing into my bottom foot so I can get back into that lunge position. Then I'll take my hands back inside my leg, back to all fours. You might find that you want to come back and rest in child's pose or another position. Sometimes just seated on the heels for a moment can feel good, or standing, kneeling, stretching out this front area a little bit, whatever feels good for you. When you're ready, we'll take that to the other side. So this time it's my left foot in front. I'm going to start with finding my lunge. In this upright version of lunge, I'm a little wobbly here, so remember, if your chair is next to you or if it's in front of you, you can rest on the chair. I'll take my bolster and put it in this position so I can be a little bit more secure. So in this upright version of lunge, my torso is upright, my lower ribs are drawing in, my abdominals are drawing in, and I have a natural arch in my low back. I'm not trying to take that into a back bend, but simply my natural arch with my hip bones pointing to the front, the same direction they're going to point in when I move this into pigeon pose. And I'll take a peek back at my back leg. It looks like it was a little bit out to the side, so I'll move it and just stabilize it a little bit more so it feels more even in my body. But remember, we really are going for how the pose feels, not how it looks. So if your foot is out to the side more and that feels perfectly fine and stable in your body, there's nothing wrong with that. I'll take my prop flat again. And remember, we're slowly going to start walking the foot in as the knee comes out, letting the knee stay wider than your hip joint. And then coming to rest on the outside of your bottom left foot. So this still feels pretty good on this side, not quite as easy as it did on the right side when I had my right foot forward. And that's because I know the shapes of my bones, my hips are a little different. I can tell when I practice that it feels different. And you'll see I just sort of self-adjusted by moving myself back a little bit further. Your foot might come forward more. All those things you can play around with to find the version that feels good. If you look at my back foot, I have the top of my foot where my laces would be on the ground. If it feels better for you to tuck your toes, that's fine too. And then on the first side, we played around with leaning forward into the chair. I find that when I do that, it shifts the stretch a little higher up on my buttocks muscle rather than more on the outside of my thigh. So you might decide to stay more upright if you want that stretch more on the outside of your thigh, if you have the same kind of shift as I do, or you can come down here. And then we'll take a few more breaths here. Start to come out. Remember, you might want to push down into your bolster or blankets with your hand, enough so that you can lift that foot, place that foot back on the floor. I'm going to move my hands to the inside of my support and drag my foot back. And I'll rest again and seated for a few moments. So before we go into our last version of pigeon pose, this is going to be the version that is usually cued in class. It's actually called half pigeon pose. It's completely on the floor without props. Just want to show you an option of using the chair. The same thing we just did, except a lunge with the chair. And so that would be from standing. I'm going to move the chair back a little bit so you'll be able to see me. And then taking the shin across the chair, back leg back. So that's another version that you can try. I'm not going to take time on that. I just wanted to give you that option. It can feel a little harder to get into because you kind of have to hang the back leg back. If you want to play around with that version on your own, that's another way to do it. If you want that little bit of a lift or more of a lift than we got on the bolster, you can also try that with, if you have like a low table, put a blanket on or something to soften it. I can feel my ankle touch the edge of the chair. All right, for the half pigeon on the floor, I like to start from a hands and knees position. This is cued different ways. Sometimes it's cued from downward facing dog. Starting from hands and knees feels nice to me. I like to work my way into it slowly, helping adjust my leg with my hands. So I'm going to start by sliding my right knee forward. And then I'm going to start by adjusting my back leg back. And sometimes it's easier to do that when I tuck my toes, pull my leg back a little more straight. So right now my bottom right foot is right under me. I'm going to start to take that knee out to the side, so out to the right side, wider than my hip. And then I'm actually going to use my hand to start dragging this foot forward. Now right now this is at about a 45-degree angle. This is often a really nice place for me to do pigeon. I can try to take my leg more parallel to the front of the mat like I did with the bolster there, but without the bolster there, that just doesn't feel as supported. It feels like I'm going to roll all over the place. Now, if you want to do some version like this and you feel like you're going to roll that way, you can grab your bolster and put it just under this right hip, the same side as the bent knee, or a blanket or whatever. Or you can keep the foot tucked in a little closer so that it's more under your hip point. Turn your hips toward the front or the short edge of your mat. Turn your torso in that direction. And remember that you can tuck your toes and extend your back leg further behind you. You can take a peek at that back leg. And mine was a little off to the side, so let's see how it feels if I put it a little more straight behind me. Feels about the same either way. And you can breathe, and if you'd like to take it into a more relaxed version, you can come down to your forearms, you can come down to the floor, or if your prop is still nearby, you have to do a little roll to get mine again. If your prop is still nearby, you can come down onto your prop. And this can feel really nice. A little bit more of a resting version of half pigeon. And whenever you're ready to come out of this, instead of rolling onto my hip, I like to push into my hand so I can start to lift that front leg and either lift or slide it back to where it was. And then you might want to do a little bit of downward dog, a little stretch in between, or a puppy pose, or a child's pose. Or whenever you're ready, we'll slide right to the second side. So remember, I'm sliding my back knee forward, maybe about halfway to my hands, and then I'll start to slide my back leg back a little bit. And I find it easier to do that when I tuck my toes and then stretch the leg long behind me, right off the mat this time. And I use my hand to help me slide that bottom foot up a little bit knee comes out to the side. You can see it on this side. I'll turn my hips so that they go toward the front. I'm really trying to face my torso toward the front. Your hips might not square all the way around to the front, again, depending on your body shape. So the idea is torso facing front, hips sinking down to the ground, really your entire pelvic girdle sinking down to the ground. And you might be able to feel that a little more if you tuck the back toes. Again, it's lengthen the back leg a little bit more. If this leg is not comfortable, adjust the foot, adjust where the leg is across the front, place something under this hip. If it feels uncomfortable, it's fine to use gravity as long as it's not feeling sharp, feeling stingy, feeling a way that's not good for your body. But if being here is like, yeah, this is a little hard, but it's not a bad hard, then you can stay here. Or you can slide your hands forward and take a few moments to rest, maybe with your cushion, maybe on your forearms. Sometimes I like to take my thumbs and do a little bit of a rest in between my eyebrows. Let's take 1 or 2 more breaths. Anything left to release, you can see if you can release it. And then again, bring some weight into your hands. Use that weight to slide the bottom or the front leg back into position. And come to take a stretch or a rest. So you might want to come up into a last downward facing dog, a puppy pose, a child's pose, or if you're ready, you can come right into a rest. I'm going to turn around to face you. You can come down to lying on your mat. And in fact, I encourage you to rest for a few minutes after this active practice. If the practice was the only practice you've done today or the first thing you've done today, you can try one of my other practices to rest a little bit more after this practice. And I will link to some of those here to give you some options for how you can follow this up. If you're ready to do a little bit more, that's something a little bit more restful. So as I said in the beginning, I hope that this practice was useful in helping you to find a version of pigeon pose that you can do when the pose is cued in class, on a video, or just when you're practicing at home, to find a version that feels comfortable in your body. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please take care.